When the United States entered World War II, the Marine Corps quickly discovered that the knives its troops were carrying weren't built for the kind of fighting they were about to do. Standard-issue utility knives of the period were thin, brittle, and designed more for opening crates than for close combat or heavy field work, and early specialized units had already tried and largely abandoned an alternative. The Marine Raiders, an elite unit formed for commando-style operations, had been issued a stiletto-style fighting knife closely modeled on the British Fairbairn Sykes dagger, a thin, symmetrical blade built almost entirely for thrusting. That design worked fine for a narrow purpose, but a knife that could only stab was nearly useless for the dozens of practical jobs a Marine actually needed a blade for in the field: cutting rope and vegetation, opening ration tins, digging, prying, and general camp work. By 1942, with island fighting in the Pacific underway and troop numbers climbing fast, the Marine Corps put out a requirement for a knife that could genuinely do both jobs, serve as a viable fighting weapon in close quarters, and hold up as a reliable, all-purpose field tool, without breaking or dulling after a few weeks of hard use in jungle heat and humidity. That requirement is what set the stage for the knife that would eventually carry the Marine Corps' reputation on its blade for the next 8 decades. It's worth understanding just how much of daily infantry life in the Pacific actually depended on a working knife, far more than most people assume from war movies focused on rifles and artillery. Marines used their blades constantly, for cutting through vines and undergrowth on patrol, hacking open coconuts and ration containers, cutting rope and canvas for shelter, and handling the countless small mechanical tasks that come up during weeks spent living out of a foxhole. A blade that snapped or dulled under that kind of daily abuse wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a genuine liability for a unit operating far from resupply. The company that answered that requirement was Union Cutlery, a knife manufacturer based in Olean, New York, working alongside Camillus Cutlery Company and 2 Marine Corps officers, Colonel John M. Davis and Major Howard E. America, who helped shape the specifications based on what troops in the field actually needed. Rather than copying the narrow stiletto pattern the Raiders had used, the design team looked to civilian hunting knives for inspiration, particularly Bowie-style patterns from companies like Western Cutlery that used a 7-inch clip-point blade, a shape with a curved, sharpened section near the tip that improves both cutting and piercing performance. The design that emerged, officially designated the 1219 C2, combined that clip-point blade with a handle built from stacked, compressed leather washers, slid onto the tang, and finished with a flat steel pommel, heavy enough to be used as a hammer or a striking tool in a pinch. A steel crossguard protected the user's hand, and the whole blade was parkerized, a phosphate coating process that gave it a dark, non-reflective finish, the same treatment used on rifles of the period, so that no shine would give a Marine's position away at night. The design wasn't perfect on its first submission. Marine Corps quartermaster officials initially rejected it, unconvinced that a private cutlery contractor's design was the right answer, but that rejection was overruled by the Marine Corps commandant, who understood that troops already fighting in the Pacific needed a better blade immediately, not after another year of internal review. On November 23, 1942, the Marine Corps formally adopted the 1219 C2 as its new fighting and utility knife. Camillus Cutlery shipped the first production run just over 2 months later, on January 27, 1943, and from there output scaled quickly to meet wartime demand, with Camillus alone eventually producing more than 1 million units, and additional manufacturers, including Robeson Cutlery and Pal Cutlery, brought in to keep pace with an army and a war that were both growing fast. The design proved effective enough that the U.S. Navy adopted the same pattern for its own sailors, redesignating it the U.S. Navy Utility Knife, Mark II, after growing frustrated with an earlier Navy knife, whose blades had a habit of snapping under stress. To avoid confusion between the two services using the same knife under different names, the Marine Corps in turn redesignated its own version as the USMC Mark II combat knife, though hardly anyone in uniform called it that. By late 1943, the new knife had officially replaced the troubled Raider stiletto across Marine special units. And it's here that the knife picked up the name that would outlive every official designation the military ever gave it. Union Cutlery had trademarked the name K-Bar back in 1923, after receiving a partially legible testimonial letter from a fur trapper describing how he'd used one of the company's knives to finish off a wounded bear that attacked him after his rifle jammed, killing what the letter called a bar. The company stamped that trademark on the blades it manufactured during the war, and because Union Cutlery's knives were so widely distributed and so visibly marked, Marines simply started calling the whole pattern a K-bar, regardless of which of the several manufacturers had actually made their particular knife. By 1944, the nickname had completely taken over in everyday use, and it's the name that survived long after the original wartime model numbers were forgotten by everyone, except historians and collectors. By the end of the war, the combined production run of Marine and Navy pattern knives across all manufacturers had passed 1 million units, a scale that reflected just how completely the design had been embraced, not as a specialty tool for a handful of elite units, but as standard equipment that ordinary infantry Marines carried alongside their rifles. Once it reached Marine hands across the Pacific theater, the knife earned its reputation the hard way, through use in exactly the conditions it had been designed for. It served through the island campaigns at Tarawa, Iwo Jima, and Okinawa, showing up in the gear of Marines in some of the most iconic combat photography of the war, including at the first flag raising on Iwo Jima, where a Marine can be seen with a KA bar on his belt. But its combat use was really only half the story. In the field, Marines relied on it constantly for jobs that had nothing to do with fighting, digging fighting positions in clay-heavy or root-choked soil, chopping through bamboo and dense jungle brush to clear paths, opening supply crates, and handling dozens of other camp tasks that a lighter, more delicate blade simply couldn't survive. That dual usefulness, being tough enough for combat and versatile enough for constant fieldwork, is exactly what the original 1942 requirement had called for, and it's what separated the design from the specialized stiletto it replaced. By the time the war ended, the knife had been issued to nearly every Marine who wanted one, and demand for it had spread well beyond the Marine Corps itself, with the Army, Navy, Coast Guard, and Navy underwater demolition teams, the forerunners of today's Navy SEALs, all adopting or requesting the same basic pattern for their own troops. The K-bar didn't disappear once World War II ended, and it didn't need a fresh act of Congress or a new procurement contract to keep showing up in American hands during every conflict that followed. Union Cutlery formally renamed itself K-Bar Cutlery Incorporated in 1952, cashing in on a nickname that had become more famous than the company's original name, and the knife pattern kept turning up unofficially in Korea and then in Vietnam, carried by troops who either held on to older wartime stock or purchased new ones privately because they trusted the design. During the 1991 Gulf War, Marine Corps Lance Corporal Robert Clark used his K-bar to defend his position during close combat, an incident that circulated among Marines afterward as fresh proof that a knife pattern approved back in 1942 still held up under real modern combat pressure, rather than just serving as a nostalgic accessory. By the time American forces deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan in the early 2000s, the KA bar was showing up again in large numbers, and the company's own leadership noted a surge in orders right before troops shipped out, an increase steep enough that the manufacturer had to start prioritizing military orders and temporarily rationing civilian sales just to keep up. Troops in both conflicts used the knives for the same practical mix of jobs Marines always had, prying open jammed vehicle hatches and equipment, clearing brush, and handling routine fieldwork, alongside its reputation as a genuinely effective close combat backup if a firearm ever failed or ran empty in the middle of a fight. What's notable across all of these later conflicts is that none of them required the knife to be reissued or reintroduced by any formal military decision. Troops simply kept choosing it on their own, generation after generation, which is a very different kind of endorsement than a supply requisition form, and arguably a more meaningful one, since nobody was forcing anyone to carry it. Here's the detail that actually explains the title of this video. At some point in the decades after Vietnam, the K-bar quietly stopped being formal standard issue equipment that every Marine received automatically from the supply system. Today's official bayonet, the OKC-3S, is a more modern design, though it still carries a clearly visible design lineage back to the original 1942 clip-point pattern, evidence of just how much of the original engineering the Marine Corps still considers sound enough to build on. And yet, despite no longer being handed out as mandatory issue, the K-bar never actually left Marine hands, because Marines simply kept buying it themselves. It became one of those rare pieces of gear that outgrew its own procurement paperwork and turned into cultural tradition instead, something senior Marines and veteran fathers hand down to sons headed into boot camp or off on their first deployment, not because a regulation requires it, but because the knife has become inseparable from what it means to be a Marine in the first place. That tradition shows up in small, telling ways far removed from combat, like the Marine Corps' formal birthday ball, where a K-bar is traditionally used to cut the ceremonial cake, a small ritual detail that says as much about the knife's symbolic weight as any battlefield story does. It's worth being clear that the modern U.S. military and the Department of Defense don't officially endorse or promote K-bar as a company or a specific product line, and the knife most Marines carry today into training or deployment is a personal purchase rather than a supply depot issue item. But that's really the point of this whole story. A knife designed in 1942 to solve a specific, urgent battlefield problem in the Pacific proved so well built and so genuinely useful that it outlasted its own official adoption, outlasted the specialized stiletto it replaced, and outlasted every attempt to formally retire it from Marine Corps life. 80 years later, it's still riding along in Marine gear, not because a regulation says it has to be there, but because generations of Marines have simply decided, on their own, that it belongs there.